Hey YouTube, hey gamers. So this is the first episode of what's hopefully going to be a recurring series on the channel where I'm not necessarily talking about gaming news, but talking about kind of some things that I've observed in the gaming universe, the gaming world, whatever you want to call it, and kind of just my thoughts, my feelings on it, and maybe some crazy conclusions, some crazy jumps, but just kind of wanted to offer my opinion about things that are going on. So it'll cover a little bit of like the news of what's going on, because that's what I consume a lot of, and kind of where my thoughts come from. But today I want to talk about competition in the gaming space, and kind of what I've been noticing recently, and kind of some trends that I see that I think are a little concerning, and where some of them crop up and come from. And I'm not just talking about competition in terms of like, oh, console wars or what games want our time, but competition even to the developer level. I think I saw something this past week that I found quite alarming and quite concerning, and a few different news outlets covered it. There were some tweets made by the devs of some games about Elden Ring. So if you've been living under a rock, you haven't heard about how insanely popular Elden Ring is yet. It's sold somewhere between 10 to 12 million copies already, and it's been out about a month, which is wild. A lot of people are already calling it their Game of the Year contender, which we'll go back to. But there's been some other phenomenal games that have also come out. But because they've been overshadowed by Elden Ring, you can tell there's a little bit of saltiness with these other games, at least with these developers. I'll show some of the tweets that they put up right here. But basically, they went through and they kind of attacked the game design of Elden Ring and said some things about the way those developers chose to make the game. And I think it's kind of clear when you look at everything that's being said, everything that's been going on, not as much coverage to their games, that this does kind of feel that it's coming from a jealousy standpoint. I think there was a time when we looked at different games and we were able to celebrate the differences. And, you know, there wasn't necessarily console wars. I remember as a kid, I didn't care if my friend had a PS2 when I had one. He had a Nintendo GameCube, and I was stoked that I could go to his house and play those games. It's a very different era than when we were kids, but it's never seemed to be quite as bad as the developers attacking each other over the way they chose to design their games. I've always felt that developers were the ones that kind of sat above all the squabble and we're all like, oh no, let me tell you about this awesome game that I'm playing, or this really cool thing that I'm seeing this other studio do. It was kind of always this like camaraderie that like they understood how hard it was to develop a video game and they worked together. And I'm curious, when did that go away? And part of me wonders if a lot of it has to do with things like the Game Awards. One of the things I mentioned earlier is that a lot of reviewers are calling Elden Ring their Game of the Year already. No, it's March. We haven't played 3/4 of the games that are going to come out this year, but this game is being hailed as so good that they're already calling it their Game of the Year. No, not a lot of them are saying Game of the Year contender. They are calling it their Game of the Year already. And I think that concept of just saying like, oh, this game is so far high above everything else, while, you know, is used to drive a point when reviewing the game and saying that you should play it, may not necessarily be the healthiest thing to do in terms of the kind of competition that it generates, because every other game dev who sees that is going to instantly be like, oh, so I guess my game is just trash, which is not necessarily a healthy reaction on their side, but it seems to possibly be what's happening. I even look back to previous Game Awards and I see awards like Final Fantasy XIV, a game that I love near and dearly, won Best Ongoing Game last year, and on Twitter, Fortnite fans erupted, and we're all like, Fortnite is right there. And it's interesting that, you know, we couldn't just celebrate that our game had something good happen to it, or another person's game had something good happen to it. It had to turn into this competition of, oh, well, let me tear down that game and tell you why you should be playing this other game that I enjoy. When I think there's room for everybody to continue to play games they enjoy and games that they love, and there will always be an audience for your game, unless your game does really, really, really bad. But I feel like that's more of a rarity these days. I think, you know, if the devs put their hearts and souls into things, they're gonna find their audience. I can think of very few titles in recent time that have just been 100 complete flops. But there just seems this grand competition to, I have to be the best, I have to be at the top recently. And those are kind of my thoughts on it. I don't think it's healthy. I think maybe some of it comes from things like the Game Awards. But I wonder how do we get out of that? How do we get back to the state where we can just, you know, celebrate each other's achievements in gaming, celebrate the massive, wonderful things that game devs are creating, and be healthy about it when something pulls for our attention and it may not necessarily be what we thought it was going to be or what the devs thought it was going to be. But let me know what you think. Do you think competition is getting bad in the gaming space? Do you think people are starting to get out of line? Or do you think the competition's healthy? Do you think it's getting us better and more creative games? Let me know down in the comments. And if you like this kind of content, subscribe. I'll be putting out something similar to this every Sunday. As always, much love, and we'll see you next time.